On the southern edges of the Sahara, the search for even a single blade of grass can be long and painful. It's a situation common to vast areas of the globe, for more than a third of the world's land mass is covered by desert. But it's a situation that's getting worse. For year by year, the deserts are expanding, pushing back the frontiers of cultivated land and bringing death where life once was. This is northwestern Sudan, an area of many cattle and few people. Raising livestock here is a constant battle against low rainfall and bare pasture. For centuries past, nomadic herdsmen like this have trekked across the desert in search of fodder for their flocks. In the past, they've paid a heavy price in lost animals, but now better veterinary care means more of the herds are surviving. As a result, the animal population in areas like this is increasing faster than the human one, and it's doing so regardless of the land's ability to support them. It's just one of the ways in which the land is being downgraded in a process known as desertification. According to one estimate, more than 1/6 of all deserts are man-made. Semi-arid zones totaling some 9 million square kilometers, that's half the size of South America, have been turned into desert by wrong land usage. And it's not something that's happening slowly. Over the last 50 years, the Sahara alone has invaded 1 million square kilometers of land suitable for farming. For the nomads, life has always centered around the water supply. And so it is today as they move from one oasis to another. But as the desert encroaches and the number of animals rises, so the demand for water mounts. This is the meeting place of the Maganin tribe of 55,000 nomads. Sudan has more than 2 million people who are totally dependent on water holes like this. The strange fact is that underneath the whole Saharan Arabian desert, the largest desert system in the world, there lies one huge reservoir of water, which in the long term may prove more valuable than the area's reserves of oil. What's not yet certain is whether the water, like the oil, is a relic of another era, or whether it's being replenished by the area's limited rainfall. Experts fear it might, like the oil, be a finite resource, which should be carefully husbanded. This is some of that water, pumped up by the government from the underground aquifer. Nomads are allowed to collect their own drinking water for just 1 hour every day. It costs 1 penny for 4 cans. In the hot season, they're allowed in for 2 hours a day. As long as they can afford the small charge, the nomads are allowed to take away as much water as they can carry, providing they don't use motorized transport. This ample supply gives them the freedom to roam, but the result is a lowering of the water table, which dries out natural water holes. The government's policy has been simply to drill deeper wells, but the wisdom of that is now being questioned. It's not just the nomads who are feeling the effects of the encroaching desert. Small villages and settlements like this are simply disappearing under the advancing dunes. Hardy goats provide the main livelihood here, since they can survive the poor pasture better than cows or even sheep. But they're a mixed blessing, for though their carcass and skins bring a short-term cash profit, the large numbers of feeding animals are stripping off whatever sparse vegetation the area does have. So the goats, which are so prized by their owners now, are simply hastening the day when the whole village will have to move on. 50 years ago, a village on this spot might well have been a successful farming community. But now, the surrounding land is so marginal that putting it under crops means ploughed earth could be blown away for good in just one dry season. These women will probably have to seek new homes within the next 20 years. Camel power drives the mill that presses sesame seeds into cooking oil. The area was once famous for its fine white sesame, but the desert has taken its toll. Over the last dozen years, the area under cultivation has been increased enormously, but productivity has dropped to less than a quarter of the previous level. It's a very similar story for other once important crops, such as groundnuts, maize and sorghum. In villages as small as this, the impact of the encroaching desert may seem regrettable, but hardly significant. The truth is very different, for this is indeed a world problem. It's estimated that of the 600 million people who live in arid lands, 30 million are directly threatened by desertification. It's happening in more than 60 countries, ranging right across the globe, from China to Chile, from Australia to the United States. And all of them are certain that the process must be halted if the world's food supplies are to have any chance at all of keeping pace with the growth of population, especially in the developing countries. The United Nations has decided the matter serious enough to warrant a world conference, which will be held in Kenya in August. Meanwhile, the Sudanese are taking their own steps to deal with the problem. They've planted lines of shrubs and carefully selected grasses in order to stabilize the soil. It's very simple, but it does work. We asked one of the experts running the scheme, Dr. Abul Saif el-Din, why they'd chosen this particular area.
Well, this area has been chosen because it is one of the largest villages in the Khairan area, and at the same time, it has a very large, comparatively large area of productive land to produce vegetables and citrus fruits, as well as dates.
And how much land was lost, and how many houses, how many trees were drowned by the sand?
Well, there was more than half of the village was damaged by the sands, and I can't say how the number exactly. How can I say a number? But it was a fairly big number of houses.
They seem very happy now down in the village when we saw them today.
Oh yes, they are very happy, and a lot of people would want something of this nature to be done around their villages.
Sudan's launched a $26 million scheme, which it hopes will be financed by its oil-rich Arab friends and some Western nations. But the country already has a fairly sizable team of experts. One of the basic facts they work from is that plant growth depends on the moisture around the roots and the temperature of the leaves, which means they can virtually ignore national figures for rainfall and sunshine, as long as they can provide soil stability, shelter from winds, and so on. However skillful the experts are, they won't be able to solve the problem on their own, for this isn't a purely technical problem. It's inextricably linked with traditional patterns of life. Here, for example, camels bring in the firewood for charcoal, which is still the basic energy source for most of the nation. But every tree felled for firewood is one tree less to provide cover from desert winds. The waste doesn't stop there, for the trees most frequently used are acacias, from which gum arabic is derived. Gum arabic is used throughout the world, both in confectionery and for making the glue for envelopes. And Sudan is the world's largest producer, with about 3/4 of the world market. In the past, gum arabic has provided about 9% of the country's export earnings, but now supplies are dwindling. It's estimated that nomads uproot nearly 550 million trees a year to make fuel for cooking. And since the rate of replacement's virtually nil, the process is in effect simply burning up Sudan's foreign exchange earnings. The problem's not confined to the Sudan, and United Nations experts hope to persuade all developing countries to increase their use of alternative energy sources, such as wind power and solar heating. But how effective would such an effort be? We asked Dr. Mustafa Kogali of Sudan's National Research Council whether desertification was a question of human behavior or simply changing patterns of climate.
Mainly human behavior. We may have some changes in the climate, but this is not very certain, and we do not know yet the magnitude of that.
What happens as a consequence of overgrazing and cutting the vegetation? What happens to the climate then?
We may have a slight change in the climate. The more you remove the vegetation, the more you may have change in the climate in the sense that it becomes more dry.
Now, how are you trying to tell the nomads and the people who live in the arid part of this country, what are you telling them? Do they not realize that they're possibly cutting their own throats?
Yes, they came to realize this, but unfortunately they came to realize this after the harm has already been done. One thing we should do for them is actually to stop digging boreholes whenever they ask for it.
Doctor, are you satisfied that it can be done and that these people who live in the arid West can survive?
Yes, I think it can be done. It can be done, but it needs quite a lot of cooperation from inside, from the people themselves, from the government, and from the international agencies.
Even the most optimistic scientists don't believe that there's any hope of turning the central Sahara green. But with the right technology and assistance, there's a good chance that the fringes of the desert can be saved. It won't be easy, but the Sudanese, along with other affected peoples, have every right to expect help from outside. The countries of the world's temperate zones, and that means by and large the developed nations, have several reasons for sharing responsibility for the problem. In the first place, it's likely that at least some of the effects of desertification are the result of ill-advised technical aid already given by developed nations. Secondly, the spread of deserts means less food to feed a growing world, and that's something with increasingly important political consequences. And in the long term, there's always the possibility that the ever-encroaching deserts will eventually alter the world's climate far beyond the present arid zones. All in all, then, the problem of desertification is nothing like as far away as it looks.